Welcome. This is Jordan with Foodbevy, the online community for food and beverage founders. And today I am talking with Sue, founder of Byrd Food, your savory oat and seed clusters designed for people. And so, Sue, let's jump right into it. I would love to hear a little bit more about how you got started and why Byrd Food.
Sure thing. So thanks for having me. I actually am, like many people in food, a second career food person. I spent the first 10 years of my career practicing in law, specifically in finance and fintech in New York. So not exactly the most intuitive transition into food, but actually most of my career I've spent helping tech companies who are just B2C grow. And so in that environment, I think in that startup environment, you either decide I'm never starting a company or I definitely have to start something on my own. And I fell into the latter camp. I've always had a really strong interest and just passion for nutrition. And I think it just ties into every aspect of well-being, your mental, your health, everything. And so I just thought about, well, what is the product that I want in my life that doesn't exist? And it was a plant-based but delicious, first and foremost, easily transportable snack that I can have on the go. I used to travel a lot for work, and even though in New York we have a absurd wealth of options as far as healthy eating goes, whenever I had meetings or depositions in like Cincinnati, it was a little bit harder, or conferences. And so I created Byrd Food, which, I don't know, let me just grab the bag so I can show you. Um, so this is Byrd Food, and you can see our first flavor is everything bagel. So very much inspired by New York. And it's just like an easy on the go snack. It has your complete nutritional profile. I had probably one of the more unique beginning stories. I was working in about a 300-person company in Flatiron in New York. The age range is probably like mid-20s to like early 40s as far as the company goes. It's a pretty solid demographic for the end consumer. I would just test out like flavors and iterations of the recipe on my coworkers for free. And then I started a Slack channel so people could just give me their feedback. They could vote on, different packaging designs. They can vote on the names of the different flavors. So it was actually just hugely helpful. It was a free like market research resource right on my hands. And as you can tell, I actually started Byrd Food while I was still working full time as a lawyer. By the time I left my job, I had like a fully baked, pun intended, product already. And yeah, and then that was last year. So it was 2019 was an interesting year, I guess. So that's how I got started.
Well, that sounds great and way to be scrappy and testing out your product among your coworkers. Definitely the way to go. So talk to me about some of the challenges in getting started in the food industry and making that transition. Was it a walk in the park and super easy?
Oh yeah, solo breeze. No, I thought I understood certain aspects about user acquisition and creating the ideal customer profile, creating like marketing content, advertising, things like that, because I've been reviewing marketing materials for like forever and just works pretty closely with our marketing team. What I did not realize was just how challenging it is to go from a software product to an actual physical product that people will be consuming. So I think it's just some of the hardest parts were honestly just figuring out like how do you actually make this thing. Um, and so I spent a lot of time at Google. I had some really helpful early on mentors, Ian Kelleher, who along with his wife Noah started Field Snacks, one of the original OG badass brands. He just, for whatever reason, both Ian and Noah decided to be kind enough to take me under their wings and gave me a lot of really great advice just on like the tactical aspect of how do you execute. I was also fortunate enough to stumble upon the community table group right here in New York. Got some really positive feedback from Mike Winnick at Our Harvest, and when he was like, "Oh, buy this once you get properly licensed," I was like, "All right, I guess I'm gonna go get a license." So I think the actually figuring out like how do you execute on a product, get it like properly licensed so you can sell it to people safely, and then just having some industry veterans giving me some really great feedback early on just helped me through that first few months.
It's really great. And I'm a big proponent too of mentors and advisors kind of in the space to really help you along the way because it should be so difficult starting on your own from
Yeah.
scratch. And there's a lot of people who have done it in slightly different ways, but overall a similar process. So you said you kind of took this on full time in 2019, and from there on, going into the end of the year, sky's the limit. And then COVID hit. How has
Yeah.
that affected
Yeah.
your business, and how have you had to pivot and adapt through it?
Yeah. So I, for myself, I honestly, truly, it was really hard on it more than anything else, just to see what a tough spot all of my colleagues and everyone was in the industry. I was actually in uh, Southern California the week that Expo West got canceled, and we had a little like one of the beverage brands actually hosted a little like orphans Expo West orphans party, and we kind of all got together and just really commiserated. And I felt so bad for so many of my fellow entrepreneurs who were like traveled from all over the world to launch their products. And comparatively speaking, I was in like a much less precarious position because I was early on. We had won some awards. We won the Good Food Award back in January, which is really exciting. And then going into Expo, I was hoping to just make some more connections, but I didn't have like a booth or anything, so I didn't have that out of pocket cost. So it was more disheartening just to see the industry take such a hit. And I tried to be there as a resource to, like again, to the fellow founders as much as I can for Byrd Food specifically. So we are a snack product, and what I noticed with the buyers were they kind of pivoted there, even though it was getting a lot of traction. Like grocery spending was basically the only categories running there was. The actual buying was a lot more focused on essentials, right? And it kind of makes sense if you think about what is the average person thinking about buying during quarantine. It's like you want to get in and out, you want to get toilet paper, you want to get milk and eggs and get out of there. You're not like kind of browsing the aisles and doing discovery for new products. So I think that was been really challenging for new brands to still have that exposure for brand discovery. We actually managed to expand our retail footprint during COVID, which I'm really grateful for. We're now in all the locations in Erewhon, which is an amazing partner to work with in Southern California. This kind of fits like the vibe of there. It's like sunny, it's bright, it's happy, it's healthy. So I actually think that for Byrd Food, like COVID has been challenging, but it hasn't taken us down. So I'm really grateful for that. My co-packer survives. I was really, oh, that one, I was really hoping that they would survive because then that meant I was in a good position. So, I mean, even having a co-packer in the first place, right? Like not having to work in a commercial kitchen and worry about that. So we're kind of actually, I feel extremely lucky in just the place in the life cycle I was heading into quarantine that we were able to kind of push it through for the next few months. I You mentioned like I'm pretty scrappy. Yeah, I being self-funded makes you really careful with money. So definitely I was not burning a ton of cash on ads prior to this, and so I think that really helped us like just keep some pennies in the bank to be able to like just push through. Because my main goal honestly is just to maintain and come out of this when everyone has the actual mental capacity to think about growth, to grow. Because if we don't survive and we run out of money, then there's no room for growth. So
No, definitely. I think that is a great position to be in. I'm happy that you were able
yeah.
to expand during that time. I know one thing that's really challenging with a new product and kind of in like a new subcategory for your clusters is how do you get people to actually try your product before
Hmm.
they actually know to buy it? And so, since trial is way down, have you brainstormed any ideas to help get your product into people's mouths during this time?
Yeah, so I mean, I personally wouldn't feel comfortable with even trialing anything in a store, even if it's permissible in the state. And we are in multiple states, and certain of the states have reopened. Um, we do a lot of in-store sampling, and that by far is the most effective way to drive discovery. And also, it helps to build that relationship with the store. It shows that you're committed as a founder to actually, get to know that store, get to know the neighborhood, get the feedback from their consumers, which is a really great way to actually get to know your buyer too, if you can meet them. So obviously, like you mentioned, that's out. We actually put a lot of thought into our packaging design, and here's where I think it matters a lot. So on the shelf, let me grab my other two so I can show you. So first of all, we have really eye-catching packaging design. Looks like a traffic light, red, green, and yellow, right? And it has like a fun bird on it. It has the flavor cue right here. It just looks like very interesting and different than everything else that's on the shelves. Most other natural organic products, a lot of them are like a white package with a picture of the product and maybe a tree or something, and that's it. So I think our packaging has always been one of our strongest suits. I was lucky enough to find an incredible packaging designer. I would definitely say invest in that if you can early on. It just makes you look legit, makes it look like a mature company, and it really, really grabs the consumer's attention. And then separately from there, we do spend time. I invested also in great pictures with a great photographer early on. So we have social content. This kind of like explains, how do you use this product? How do you eat it? Because that's the number one question people have. Like, how do you eat this? And I want to be like, with your mouth. I don't know. But yeah, it's just displaying different use cases, like as a topping in other savory applications. For example, explaining that this is definitely savory, not sweet. Hopefully when you look at a bagel and a piece of pizza and a chili pepper, you're not like, oh, this looks like it's sweet. So yeah,
So
it's just the
question around
same.
that then, why did you decide to go more savory flavors versus sweet flavors?
That is a great question. Because I did some very anecdotal research, and if you look at the kind of functional snacks, functional nutrition aisle, pretty much everything is sweet, right? Like after Larabar started, like and Cliff Bar, and then into RX Bar, you just end up with endless amounts of like bars and trail mixes, and these on-the-go snacks that have protein and fiber and will fill you up. It's like more satiating than popcorn, but more of like a real meal replacement. Pretty much everything in that category is sweet. And if it's not sweet, then it's probably like meat-based, like a jerky type of thing. And I wanted to make something that was completely plant-based that actually gives you protein. And our product has 5 grams of protein and an 140 calorie serving, which is really solid. And it has a savory flavor profile because have you noticed that it's really easy to finish off a bag of chips, but
Yep.
you're maybe done after like a couple of Oreos? So savory snacks are just like really easy to eat. They're addictive. It's delicious. And then hopefully it completely cuts out sugar. And I think like carbs are okay, fat is okay. The only thing that's like not really that great for anyone's diet is sugar. And I think everything, even some of these healthy quote unquote products, have a ton of sugar. So if you ever look at the back of a label of an RX bar, even that has like 12 grams of sugar in one bar. It's insane. It's like
It's
as much as a
crazy.
candy
Yeah.
bar. So I feel really good about everyone who eats Byrd Food, and for myself personally, because it's a packaged product, but it's not processed and it doesn't have a boatload of sugar in it. So that's why we went the savory route.
That's great. As you look over the next 6 to 12 months, how are you changing your strategic plan in terms of where you focused on selling, opening up new distribution, getting in front of consumers?
Yeah, so we're actually going to be focusing a lot more on e-commerce over the next few months. And when I launched, one mistake I made was thinking that I can both be retail focused and e-commerce focused at the same time. Turns out they're two really, really different businesses, and the amount of effort it takes to get into retail is just incredibly challenging. And so I took the last couple months actually just to do some like internal reflection on what do I think is the future for this product, and where do I think my skill sets lie, and what energizes me and what does not energize me. I think for me, I really like the consumer interaction piece the most. I did so much sampling myself directly, just like standing in a tiny booth in a store, getting feedback from consumers. And that's the part that I really, really enjoy, honestly, getting to know the people who are buying my products. And I feel like with e-commerce, it's a direct relationship that you're building with the person that's purchasing your product. Whereas in retail, it is a relationship you're building with the buyer and their whole separate set of needs, right? And I think that for this category, it's interesting because it will probably never be able to survive without a retail footprint. But now with sort of changing consumer habits, increase in e-commerce spending, and then quite frankly, like the decrease in barrier to entry for an e-commerce business, I think it might actually, and who knows, I could be completely wrong. But my thesis is that if I focus on e-commerce for the next 6 months as opposed to retail, give retail a chance to kind of rebound back from this insanity of quarantine, then in 6 months, I will have a more loyal consumer base already. So then when I tell them, oh, hey guys, we're actually in your city in Cincinnati now, if you want to go by, and then so we can do an email campaign for those users, run some promotions there. Yeah, so I guess we'll see how it goes.
Got it. It totally makes sense. And then I know you're, still just a couple years into the journey. If you were to give a piece of advice to a food or beverage founder, what would you tell them?
Yeah. So the number one piece of advice I would give to people is that you should definitely talk to people about your ideas. A lot of times I notice that I have people reach out to me for advice and they're like, oh, we're in stealth mode, blah, blah, blah. And that's classic tech person who go into do anything. Everything is in stealth mode first. But quite frankly, I think there's very little IP in food and beverage. Like you're never really truly reinventing the wheel or getting anything that you can get IP protection around. Apart from your like trademark and your name and your logo, certainly protect that if you feel uncomfortable. But short of you coming up with a new process or some new like ingredient or chemical process, there's not really anything that crazy confidential or proprietary about what your product is. So if you just kind of work in a closed room and you think to yourself, oh, I think this is the best idea of all time, and then you launch it and it's like crickets, well, of course, because you didn't talk to anyone about it. I actually found it really helpful as I built my business in the beginning was at every stage, I just try to seek out as much feedback as possible, like brutal feedback from strangers. And I got so much brutal feedback, but it was really, really helpful. And actually, as it turns out, like the end product is substantially similar to what I started with. So like knock wood, if people still think it's a good idea. But people would be like, I think the bird's dumb. Is this actually for birds? And all this stuff. But if I never got that feedback from strangers who didn't know me, like I wouldn't know that those are going to be pain points that I need to focus on. With the product design, with the packaging design, and with overall marketing like messaging. So I guess my advice is, yes, certainly seek out mentorship from people who've been there, done that. They have deep, deep wisdom, but then also just seek out feedback from like anyone, like any consumer who could potentially spend $5 to buy your product. Like you should listen to them and actually take that feedback, have the humility to actually take the feedback.
I think that's really great advice. And it's interesting because with T Squares, our main ingredient is puffed millet. And we had consumers early on that would tell us like, this looks like Byrd Food. And they meant that in a negative way.
Yeah.
And, I looked up, I was like, well, millet is one of the number one ingredients in most Byrd food. So that makes sense. But
Yeah.
I think it's smart how, being able to lean into that name and say,
Yeah.
hey, look, there are seeds in here and oat clusters, and that's okay. And yeah, it looks like Byrd Food, but it's still going to be delicious.
Yeah.
So I love that. Well, Sue, thanks so much for being on today and joining me, and best of luck.
All right. Thanks so much, Jordan. I really enjoyed this conversation.